All right, we'll say good morning. Good morning. So wonderful, incredible to welcome everyone here this morning. Such an incredible schos to be able to incredible. Wonderful to welcome. You hear me in the back all right? Good. Thank you. All right. I'll try to be mindful and project. Ari, if you, for some reason, if you don't, somebody in the back, just let me know if for some reason you can't hear. And I'm sorry? All right. Want to welcome back Ari Lichtman to the shir? It took 3 minutes. It took 3 minutes.
I'm hearing you perfectly. I don't feel safe, but I feel you perfectly.
Good. Just get it out. We good? All right, good. Welcome to Pesachim. Good. I want to begin by thanking this morning's shir sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, Sami and Malka Esterson, for dedicating the shir memory of their parents, for getting all the children just memory of their parents, Yitzchak Leib ben Aaron, HaKohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch Avram, Hinda Bas Henach Ephraim, to thank our Day of Learning sponsors, my in-laws, Dr. and Mrs. Gorel, for dedicating all of the shiurim today, promotion of the yard site of my mother-in-law's father, Mr. Avram Schwimmer, Avram ben David Zev HaKohen Zichron Livracha, Frank and Danielle Storch, for dedicating the Day of Learning today, for the Shloshim of Frank's mother, Mrs. Hannah Storch, Chana Bas Avram Pesach Zichron Livracha, for our Daf Yomi sponsors, for Refuah Shalema for Dr. Aviva Weisbord, Ruchama Aviva Bas Shena Chana, as well as for a Refuah Shalema for Rachel Yehudis Bas Tova Gittel, and Hillel and Dina Sokoloff, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Hillel's brother, Alan Sokoloff, Elio ben Avram Abba. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah. Those who acquire a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. And I both say, with that, let us begin. Shechianu, beginning of Meseches Pesachim. Here we go. I will say, Orla Basar, Bold Kines Achametz, Beis Amud Aleph. So I both say, the first parak of Meseches Pesachim deals with the fascinating discussion of Bedikas Chametz. Bedikas Chametz. So I just want to tell you, lest you think that, well, Bedikas Chametz, Mamish, what does Bedikas Chametz have to do with me in Chodesh Kislev? So I will say, the Sfarim bring down that Bedikas Chametz is not just a din in Erev Pesach, but remember, Chametz is a remez to the Yetzer Hara. Right? Chametz, the leaven, represents all of the things that are dysfunctional and in disrepair inside of us. And therefore, I will say, in reality, there's a mitzvah to do Bedikas Chametz each and every day, to really find the chametz that's inside of me, to go ahead, identify it, isolate it, and ultimately destroy it, so that I could be a fully functional individual. So wherever we learn Gabi Bedikas Chametz, doesn't just apply for Erev Pesach, applies every day. Arla Arbasar Bokin Esa Chametz. We'll say, I'm purposely going to leave this word undefined, because actually this is going to be the topic of today's daf, the definition of ar. But ar la'arba asar, in the ar of the 14th day of Nisan, which is Erev Pesach, bodkin esa chametz la'ar haner. We search for chametz by candlelight. Obviously, we'll say we're going to explain each part of this Mishnah as we go along in the Gemara. Kol makom shein machnisin bo chametz. So we'll say first halacha and hilchos. So actually, second halacha. First halacha and bedikas chametz is we check or la'arba asar. What or la'arba asar is, we'll have to see. Second halacha, we'll say this is incredibly important. You only have to do bedikas chametz in a makom shemachnisin bo chametz. So we'll say this is actually very important, because just as an aside, so often Pesach cleaning or preparation for Pesach becomes like spring cleaning. So we're going to see that the halacha of bedikas chametz is you are only obligated to check for chametz in places where you bring chametz. Let's say, for argument's sake, in your house, we don't bring chametz upstairs to the bedrooms. I'll say that's your rule in your house. So say that if that's true and mamish people abide by it, then there's no need to check for chametz upstairs, right? There's no need to do anything like that. Halacha l'maisa. So again, only have an obligation to do bedikas chametz in a place where chametz is normally brought. Ubameh amru beishuros b'marti. So we'll say, so if that's the case, why is it then, we'll see this a little bit later on, that they said, we'll see where they said and who said, that you have to check 2 rows in the wine cellar. So we'll say, bepashtos, a wine cellar is a place what we call makom she'in machnisin bo chametz. Bepashtos, you don't bring chametz into your wine cellar. So if that's the case, then why do we say later on that you have to go ahead and check 2 rows of your wine cellar. To which the Gemara says, "Inachinami makom shemachnisin bo chametz." That's talking about a wine cellar where in fact you do bring chametz. So again, we'll discuss the parameters that if you take a look at Rashi just a moment, Rashi says shtei shuros shel chavios hasaduros b'martei shel yain tzarich livdok beinehem acharei shamarnu komakom shemachnisam bo chametz vein tzarich livdok lama hutzrechu lebotkan. Shabbos say, I don't understand. You just got finished saying that halacha l'maisi you don't have to check any place where you don't normally bring chametz into. So a wine cellar isn't a place where people don't normally bring chametz. So why is it that we said that you have to check the 2 rows of the wine cellar? To which the Gemara says, you're right. That's a reference ultimately again to a wine cellar in which they do bring in chametz. We'll see this later on. The Gemara is going to discuss this interesting idea that everything was. Sometimes the shamus, right, like the waiter, the attendant, sometimes he would be serving and eating as well, and we'd have to go to get more wine. He would bring his food with him into the wine cellar. In that case, it would be a makom shemachnisin bo chametz. So we have on one hand, in general, we would assume that a wine cellar is a makom she'in machnisin bo chametz. You don't bring chametz into a wine cellar unless you do. So therefore, we'll see when the Mishnah says you have to check the first 2 rows of the wine cellar. That's dafka talking about a wine cellar that's a makom shemachnisin bo chametz. So we'll say, interestingly enough, this is a machlokis that we'll discuss. Beis Shammai omrim beis shuros al pnei kol hamartev. So Beis Shammai says that when we say, so we'll say, here's what we know: when you have a wine cellar into which you do bring chametz. So we'll say, here's what we know. The waiter, when he goes into the wine cellar to get wine, generally he doesn't go to the back of the wine cellar to get wine. He'll take wine somewhere from the front of the wine cellar and kind of work his way back. So therefore, you're not going to have to check the wine cellar in its entirety. You have to check 2 rows. As we're going to see, there's a machlokis Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, what 2 rows means, and which 2 rows, therefore, you have to check. So Beis Shammai omrim beis shuros al pnei kol hamartev. So Beis Shammai says you have to check 2 rows, literally again, on the face of the entire wine cellar. We'll see what that means in the Gemara. Ubeis Hillel omrim shtei shuros hachitzonos shehin ha'elyonos. And Beis Hillel says you have to check the 2 outer rows, which are the upper rows. We'll say what exactly this means, and Yirtzeh Hashem, we will see in the Gemara. Good. So we'll say today's topic, my or. So we'll say the Mishnah taught me a very simple halacha. Or l'arba asar b'kines hachametz. I have to check for chametz on the R of the 14th of Nisan. What does R mean? We'll say mechlokes. Rav Huna Amar Nagi. Rabbi Huda Amar Leili. Rav Huna says it means daytime or light. I should say light. And Rabbi Huda says it means night. We'll say take a look actually before we get to Rashi. So we'll say, so just this is our topic for today. Rav Huna says again, R means light. Again, these terms are very, not day, but light. And Rabbi Huda says it means night, lele. Kasaka daitcha, I would have thought, man da amar nagi mamish. So we'll say, I might have thought that when Rav Huna says light, we'll say, you would assume, what does light mean? What does light mean? Day. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, man da amar nagi mamish kishiyair hashachris shel yudalid. See, I would have thought that light means daybreak. And therefore, Rabbi Huda is saying is or la'arbasa bolkines hachametz means as soon as the sun comes up, right? Kishiyara shachar, as soon as the sun comes up, or daybreak we'll call it, we won't have to get into specifically which one that is, right? As soon as day breaks, then Allah Chalamai said that's when you do b'dikas chametz. Uman da'amar leile mamish. And the opinion who says nighttime, that or means night, that's Rabbi Huda, ultimately again refers to Laila Mamish. Look at Rashi. Continue Rashi. Man damar Leile Mamish Logar. Again, Vaday Laila Hu Mamish. Good. So we'll say, so I would have assumed, so here's what we have. Rav Huna tells me R means Nagi, day. And I assume that what does day mean? Day means daybreak. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, I'm going to do B'dikas Chametz on the morning of the 14th. Versus Rabbi Yehuda, who says that R means night, I'm going to do B'dikas Chametz on the night of the 14th. So we'll say now we're going to analyze this. Meisvei haboker ar v'anashim shulchu. So we'll say the pasuk by Achi Yosef, right? By Yosef's brothers, the pasuk says haboker ar. Literally, again, the morning became light, and the men were sent. So we'll say the story behind the pasuk doesn't matter. What matters to us? What matters to us? boker ar, which tells you what does ar mean? What does ar mean? Daybreak. Alma or yimamahu. So most of the Gemara says, oh, mefurish, it's clear. Ar means day. Ar means day. To which the Gemara says, no. Miksiv ha'ar boker. Rabbi say, does it say ar boker? Now, both remember again, if it would have said ha'ar boker, then ar is the noun, right? The fact that it says haboker ar, boker is the noun, ar is just the modifier. So listen to this. So the Gemara says, miksiv ha'ar boker. Does it say ar first and then boker modifies ar? No. Ar ksiv, it says haboker ar. It says literally again, the morning became light. Kiman da'amar safra nahar. Like one who said, the morning has become illuminated. Now, both say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Miksiv ha'ar boker, delishtama ula ar hanu boker. So you both say, had the pasuk written ha'ar boker, then I would have said that what? That ar means boker. The timsilomar the ar shem davarhu the kari la boker ar. Both say when it says ar shem davar means a noun. Then ar would have been the noun. The kari la boker ar. But no, it says haboker ar ksiv. Rashi, hi ar lav shem davarhu. Ar is not a noun. Hu ella haboker heir. Rather, both say what it means is the morning became light. V'ha'anoshim shulchu. Kiman damar safra nahar, ulefi darko limdach hakosov derech haras me'acha Yosef, shemtinu ad she'ira mizrach kidad Yehuda aval or shu shem davar enu ela layla. So this is actually very interesting. So what it could just mean is, what the Gemara is saying, is or could just simply be a modifier to the noun. So what or just means is, whatever time of day the noun is, ultimately again, or modifies that. So haboker or just means the morning has come into its full form. We'll see what the ramifications of the pasuk are in just a moment. But lamaisa, it doesn't mean that ar itself means morning. So the Gemara says, and I will say, therefore, what do I learn from you? So you have to ask yourself, why does it say that? In other words, what does the pasuk add? The pasuk's telling me that the brothers of Yosef, Aboker, Arva, Nashim, Shulchu, the brothers of Yosef left Mitzrayim. So we'll say, ultimately, again, why does it have to say Aboker, Ar? Right? So why don't you just say Haboker? What does ar add to this? So we'll say, remember, there's two parts. We were trying to bring this pasuk as a raya that ar means day. So the Gemara says, no, you can't bring a raya from that. That would have been true if it would have said ha'ar boker. The fact that it says haboker ar, boker is the noun, ar is the modifier, and all ar means is that the particular noun, in this case boker, has come to full fruition. It's fully morning. But or itself, or by itself, could simply just as easily mean night. We'll say, so therefore, what's the takeaway message of the pasuk? We'll say, it teaches us an important lesson, that whenever you set out on a journey in life, a person should always enter into their lodgings bechitov, and also embark upon their journey bechitov. We'll say, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi, right across bechitov. Hayotze lederech. Both say if somebody is going out on a particular journey, yikanes arvis lebeis malon ba'ot hachama zorachas. So I'll say, interestingly enough, should check into his lodging before the sun goes down. Should check into your hotel. If you're traveling, check into your hotel while it's still daytime. Ulamachar yamtin ad hanetzachama v'az v'yetze v'az tovlo. So we'll say similarly. So when you check into your lodgings, you should check into your lodgings while the sun is still out, before the sun sets. And when you set out for your journey the next morning, you should make sure to wait for sunrise. And then you could go out. As tovlo, sha'ar tovlo, because light is good. Why is light good? Shene'emar ba'ar kitov, umahi tovaso, mipnei achayis, umipnei halistin. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the Gemara says, the pasuk is coming to teach us just derech eretz. V'haboker ar v'anoshim shulchu. When should you set out on your journey? When the sun comes up. Why? Because it's light. We'll say it's just a matter of safety. Safety. Better to travel when it's light outside, less danger. Check into your inn at night before the sun goes down, less danger. That's the ultimate yisod. Therefore, haboker, I will say, it happens to be that there's an incredible hashkafic impact in that statement as well. Which is what does it mean? The olam yikanes adam b'chitov yetzi b'chitov. Also, what it means is, when you set out on a journey in life, it's always important to have clarity at every stage of that journey, right? When the journey ends and when the journey begins, have clarity. A lot of times we set out on things in life, and when we start out, there's clarity. When we start out, I know what I'm doing, I know where I'm going, I know what I have in mind. And then often, as the journey continues, we lose that clarity. It's the Gemara saying, the olam yikanes ad mechitov, the yetze bechitov. But see, the order is interesting. When the yikanes also can mean when you finish something. When you finish something, make sure you have the same clarity as when you started it. Have clarity as to why you do the things you do in life and maintain that clarity throughout the life journey. Neisve, the Gemara goes weiter. So we'll say still, so no raya to ar. Neisve, uke ar boker yizrach shemesh. So we'll say the Gemara quotes another pasuk from Shmuel. Uke ar boker yizrach shemesh. Like the light of the morning, the sun will shine forth. So we'll say it seems to be pretty explicit. Alma or yimamahu. So we'll say that would seem to indicate that ar, right, means daytime. Ar means daytime. To which again the Gemara says, Miksiv ar boker. Does it say ar boker? No, rather what does it say? Uke ar boker ksiv. Both say it means, and like the light morning. Whereas ar boker would have been a better raya. That would have kind of created a verbal unit, right? Ar boker. It says uke ar boker. So what does uke ar boker mean? Vachi kamar uke ar boker ba'olam hazeh kein zrichas shemesh latzadikim li olam haba. That I will say ultimately again, uke ar boker, like when the dawn breaks, when the sun comes up in this world, that is like the rising of the sun for the tzaddikim in olam haba. So we'll say, so once again, what you begin to see is that sometimes the word ar, and I will say, for us it's a little bit difficult because we are automatically assume that of course ar means light. But what the Gemara is trying to highlight over here is that ar could also be a word that really represents, almost like an actualization or a coming to fruition. So depending on what's attached, so let's say ka'ar boker means the boker itself is coming into its full essence. But lav dafka, it means light, or it means day on its own. Really, it's being used as a modifier. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, I'll ask another kasha. Vaikra lekim li ar yom. So we'll say this is pretty explicit. The pasuk says, Chodesh Baruch Hu called the ar day. So we'll say that's kind of it. So the Gemara says, Alma ar yimamu. So I just want to point out, it's also fascinating that the Gemara didn't start with this pasuk. Just very, very interesting. I don't know why. But okay, good. Vaikra lekim li ar yom. Chodesh Baruch Hu called the ar day Alma ar yimamahu. Obviously, then you see that ar ultimately again is called day. To which the Gemara says, no, hachi kamar. This is actually what it means to say lemeir uba kara oyom. So we'll say what it means is, look at Rashi, ulemeir uba kara yom mishar shemaschil lahayir v'hay ar lav shem davarhu. So we'll say this is very interesting. So in the way the Gemara is understanding is vayikra lakim la ar yom. When it begins to become light, HaKadosh Baruch Hu called that time of day, Yom. But ar itself as a noun, right? Ar itself as a word does not necessarily mean day. In other words, they're both saying there's almost like ar as a noun and ar as more of a description. So the Gemara is suggesting Vayikra Elokim lo ar yom is not saying that ar means yom. Ar in this pasuk means a process. The process through which the day begins to break. The process in which light begins to come into the world. Kadosh Baruch Hu called that yom. But ar by itself, when used as a standalone term, could mean potentially something else. Ella, if that's the case, ulosh choshech kara laila. So we'll say if that's the case when it says, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu called choshech nighttime, lemachshech uba kara laila, does that mean that from the time that it begins to become dark, that's called night? But Rabbi say that's not true. V'ha kaimalan, that says hakochavim imamuhu. See, Rabbi say nighttime is not like that. In fact, again, remember from our brachos days, that Rabbi say when is nightfall? When is true nightfall? Says hakochavim. right? We don't say that it's choshech. We don't say that it's laila from the time it begins to become dark already by shkias hachama, by sunset. But again, that's not night. That's not night. So we'll say. So again, the Gemara is going to say, if you're going to tell me, or la'ar kara yom, vayikra lakim la'ar yom, and you want to say, no, ar doesn't mean light, but rather ar means the process of the lightening of the horizon, right? The process of the illumination of the horizon, that's called yom. So then it has to be l'choshech kara layla, means the process of getting darker is layla, but that's not true. It's not layla t'lafel tzeis ha'kochavim. To which the Gemara says, Elahachi kamar. This is what it means to say. Kamar, karya rachmana l'nehora, upakde amitzvasa diyamama. Rather, I will say what it means is as follows. HaKadosh Baruch Hu called out the light. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rabbi say second white light in Rashi. Elatar tzachi kayir achmar l'nehora hay vayikra lav kriyashim. Rabbi say this is just an incredible touch in the pasuk. Vayikra Elokim la'ar. Rabbi say all of these years we thought the pasuk meant HaKadosh Baruch Hu called our light the day. The Gemara says no, that's not what it means because ar doesn't necessarily mean day. So rather, what does vayikra Elokim la'ar yom? What does it mean? Rashi says. Haikra lav kriya shemhu. The pasuk is not the giving of a name. See, I both said this whole time when we read this pasuk, we thought Vaikra lakim la'ar yom is God is naming the ar. Up until now, ar was called what? What was ar called? Ar. It was just called ar. Now HaKadosh Baruch Hu says you're not called ar anymore. Rather, what are you called? You're called yom. Tushmar says no, that's not what it means. What it means is Vaikra lav kriya shemhu. God is not naming ar, he's not renaming from ar to yom, rather, the Demet Shekar Shema ar Ella, Kara Lebriya Hami'ira, Shebara Mehod Ma'ateo Levusha. Rather, I both say what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying is he's commanding the light. He's commanding the light. Upakte amitzvasa diyamama, tzivo l'shamish bayom, u'lechoshech tziva l'shamish balayla. Kara kimelech shekar li avdo, we'll say, what a beautiful interpretation of the pasuk. So look what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, look back at the Gemara. Elohi kamar, kari rachmana l'nahora. Kadosh Baruch Hu called forward the light. Upakde, he commanded him, amitzvasa diyamama, to dafka illuminate the day. The kari rachmana l'chashucha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu summoned darkness before him. Upakte amitzvasa dilayla, and ultimately again commanded him regarding night. So if Rabbi say, turns out this whole time I thought Vayikra Elokim la'ar yom was HaKadosh Baruch Hu naming the ar, right? Ar, you now have a new name. Your new name is Yom. In which case, it seems to be a pretty mafurish idea that ar means Yom. The Shemar says no. HaKadosh Baruch Hu over here is talking about a dynamic. There's a dynamic of light, there's a dynamic of darkness. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells ar, the concept of light, ultimately it is your job to illuminate the day. And here's the definition of day. And he calls forward, Vayikra, we'll say, is not, see, we always thought Vayikra meant he named. Rather, says the Gemara, no, Vayikra means he summoned. He summoned the light and said to the light, here's your job. He summoned the darkness and said to the darkness, your job, here's your job. But I both say what it doesn't give us is a true definition of ar. So we're still back to where we were. So meisvei, so I'll say again, we're still very simple mission today. What is the definition of ar? So meisvei, halalu kol kochvei ar. So we'll say here, the pasuk says, praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all kochvei ar, literally again the stars of light. So the Gemara says, ama ar artu. Both it seems to be a pretty good raya. That's what? What does ar mean? Ar means evening. Ar means evening. So because say again, it's the light associated with the stars. So stars are out at night. So bepashto, they're visible at night. So bepashtos again, ar means nighttime. To which the Gemara says, no. Hachi kamar, halalu kol kochve, kol kochavim hami'irim. But say what it means is no raya about ar. Rather, what it means is all the stars that shine bright, ultimately again should give kavod to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Should sing El Miata, Kochavim hami'irim hu debau shabuche, Shemir lo bau shabuche. So I understand only the stars that shine bright have an obligation to praise the Ribono Shel Olam, but the other ones do not. So does that make any sense? V'haksiv, but the pasuk also says halalu kol tzivav. Both say the pasuk says all of the hosts of the heavens, which means all of the stars, the ones that shine, the ones don't shine, all have to give shevach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eloha kamash malan. The ar de kochavim nami arhu. Rather, Rabbi, you both say you're right. Rather, here what it's coming to teach us is that the light of the stars is considered to be light as well. To which the Gemara says, who cares? What does that matter to me if the light of the stars is considered to be light? I'll tell you why the Gemara says. It's an interesting case. If somebody makes a neder not to get benefit from the light. So we'll say, let's say someone makes a neder, I hereby take a neder not to get any benefit from any light. Then what does it teach me? Asr ba'oran shel kochavim. We'll say, ultimately, again, you're not allowed to derive any light, benefit from light, not just of the sun and not just of the moon, but even from the stars, because the light of the stars is called light as well. Okay, good. So we'll say, well, it still doesn't help us. So we'll say we're still stuck. What does ar mean? So meisvei la'ar yakum lotzeach yiktal ani ve'evyon ubalayli yikaganov. So we'll say here, interestingly enough, the Gemara quotes a pasuk from Eov. So we'll say here, Eov says, literally translated, la'ar yakum lotzeach, by the light, by the ar, the rotzeach will get up, yiktal ani ve'evyon. He will go ahead and he will kill the ani, the pauper, and the impoverished one. Ubalaylo yihi keganov. And at night, he will be like a thief. So Rabbi said, this is very interesting. So what do you see? What's happening over here? So what's happening over here, Rabbi say, is you see a contrast. There's ar and there's laila, which seems to be a pretty good indication. Rabbi say, what does ar mean? What does ar mean? Day or morning, right? Morning, day. So the Gemara's Amud Beis, ha midika amar ubalayli hikiganov. Rabbi said, the fact that the pasuk says ultimately again at night he'll be like a ganov al ma'ar yamamahu. I will say this is a pretty good indication that ultimately, again, ar is daytime. Ar is daytime. To which the Gemara says, no. Hasam hachi kamar. I will say this is what Eov was saying. I'm sorry, actually I should leave Eov. This is what we learn from this passage. I will say it's actually an incredible halacha. Milsa. If it is clear to you, kinahora, like light, like a fire, da'ana fashos ka'asi, that I will say, see here, let me give you a little bit of background to this. What the Gemara is saying is like this is false. Actually, take a look at Rashi. Hachi kamar, mashenasna l'chator rishus alba machtaras. We'll say there's a halacha that says that if someone comes and breaks into your home at night, baba machtaras, that the halacha is you have the license to kill them, right? Now we'll say now understand the background to that halacha. So look at Rashi for just a moment. V'huka Meis ein lo damim. So let's listen to this. The halacha says, in machteres, if somebody surreptitiously, right, somebody secretly, right, furtively breaks into your home and you end up killing them, there is no liability for that. I'm reading Rashi, about say divrei maskel hachi ka'amar. So Rashi says over here, in bar lecha hadavar ka'ar, if it is clear to you like light, shuba al iskei nefashas, that the person who's coming to rob you is ready to kill you. Dahainu kol adam. Now both say, we assume that, how do you know? How do you know if the person who broke into your home was ready to kill you or not? So both say it's very simple. We assume everyone's willing to kill you, right? If they're breaking into your home, they're ready to kill you in order to get what they want, with one exception. He says, chutz me'av al habein, ukiyotzebo shemakir bo shehu ohavo. He may be willing to rob you, but he's certainly not going to kill you, right? Or vice versa. The son breaks into the father's home. And we'll say, no, the Gemara gives that as an example. Whereas if it turns out that the person who broke into your home is someone who loves you, which I will say to yourself, someone who loves me broke into my home. Also, I tell you, the Klal Golden relationship sounds crazy. We do terrible things to people we love all of the time. We say things we shouldn't say. We do things, I still love them. I don't love them any less. It's just sometimes we profoundly mistreat people who we love. So so the father's breaking into his kid's home, or the kid's breaking in. I love my father very much. I love my son very much. But sometimes we mistreat people who we love. So Rashi goes on, he says, so therefore, again, I will say, it's clear in all other circumstances, if somebody's coming to rob you and you stand up to defend your property, they would be ready to kill you. Therefore, again, therefore, I will say, any person who stands ready to kill me has the din of a murderer. And what's the halacha? The halacha is, if somebody's going to chas v'shalom murder me, I have the right, the obligation, to kill them before they kill me. V'nitan reshus l'chol hakodim lahatil es bala mammon b'nafsho shel baba machteres. And I will say, therefore, halacha l'maisa, I have the right and the ability to go ahead and kill the person who's ready to kill me, obviously before they have the chance to do so. Ubalayla, so let's listen to this. I'm just reading Rashi that we'll see in the Gemara. However, again, I will say, when is that so? When do you have a license to kill someone who's robbing you? Only when it's unequivocally clear that they have intentions to kill you. Now, I will say, now clarity in this case essentially comes from the fact, as long as it's someone who I don't know and I don't have a relationship with, the assumption is if somebody's breaking in, they're ready to kill also. They're ready to murder also. So therefore, if it's clear to me that I'm in mortal danger, then einachinami, I have the ability to stand up and kill that person first. Rashi goes on, Ubalayla, im mesapkelan kilayla kigon sha'adam ze oavecha, shuavicha, v'racham avalecha, v'mayisa omikineng delahatza omoncha, inu hargicha, ye benecha kigana, v'lonita lahargo. So we'll say, if halacha l'maisa, however, the person who's robbing me, if it's not clear, in other words, if it's like nighttime, so we'll say in this case, daytime means clarity, nighttime means lack of clarity. If there's clarity that the person who broke in is ready to kill me, then I could kill them first before they kill me. But if it's not clear, i.e. it's someone who loves me, someone I have a relationship with, then I treat them as a ganov and not as a rotzech. So let's see this now in the Gemara. So here we go. So the Gemara, remember again, I want to point out, so the Gemara wanted to bring this pasuk as a raya to say that R ultimately means day, to which the Gemara says, no, hachi kamar, I pshita lecha milsa kinahora, da'anafashas ka'as yirotzechu, v'nitan la'atzila b'nafsho. We'll say if the person breaking into your home, if it's as clear as day to you, kinahora, as hora literally means like a fire. Rashi says, l'davar hameir. We'll say it means ultimately, again, like a source of illumination. If it is as clearly illuminated, if it is clearly illuminated to you that the person who is breaking into your home is ready to rob you, and if you stand up for yourself, they'll be ready to kill you as well, then what? Rotzeachu. The person has the status of rotzeach, as a murderer. V'nitan lahatzila b'nafsho. And ultimately, again, I am permitted to kill that person before they kill me. But I will say, ultimately, again, if I'm not sure, if I'm just not sure about the individual, about whether or not, again, I will say, this would be like a case of the father, case of the son, Yubenecha kiganov. Ultimately, again, I should treat them like a ganov, like stam, a thief, not a murderer. And ultimately, again, I would not have the right to go ahead and kill them before they kill me. Therefore, I will say, what the Gemara is saying over is, don't bring any rayas from this pasuk, because rather it's saying or yakum rotzeach yakal yiktal ani ve'evyon or balayla yekiganov. Both says, teach me in a profound yison. If it's la'or, if it's as clear to you, illuminated to you, that the person who's breaking into your home is ready to kill you if you stand up for your money, then ultimately, again, they're the din rotzeach and you could kill them. Ubalayla yekiganov. But if halacha l'maisa, it's not clear to you that they would kill you for your money because they love you, it's someone they have a relationship with, then ultimately they're not a rotzeach, but they're treated like a ganov, and therefore you can't kill them in order to go ahead and save your money. Therefore, Rabosai, there's no raya from that pasuk about what ar means. Why? Because in this context, Rabosai, the word ar is not being used as day. Rather, what is ar being used as? Clear, luminescent illumination. If it's clarity, ar means clarity in this context. Laila means lack of clarity. So back to the drawing board. So here we go. Meisvei, yichashvu, kochvei nashvo, yikavu la'ar. Supposed to hear the Gemara is quoting from the pasuk in Eov. So yechshichu kochvei nishbo, yikavu la'ar va'ayin, va'al yira ba'af apei shachar. So supposed to here the pasuk says literally again, they will go ahead here. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says, kochvei nashpo, kochvei lelo. So I'll say literally again, yichashchu, it will become as dark as the stars of the night. They will yearn for light, but it will not be. And they will not see, literally again, afape shachar. Rashi says over here, the illumination of the morning. Midika'amar yikavu la'ar va'ayin. We'll say the fact that it'll say, so we'll say, this is Eov, right? This is part of Eov, where Eov is lamenting his plight. So the Gemara says over here, the fact that it says, Midika'amar yikavu la'ar va'ayin, the fact that it says it will desire ar, and it is not to be, alma or yimamuhu. So we'll say that's a pretty clear indication that ar means day. Hasam, to which the Gemara says, no. First of all, Eov in general is different. Hasam, mela tu de kalayit le Eov lemazole. Eov is cursing his mazel. And he's saying, Hey Rava, the litzpi hach gavra lenahura, v'lo lishkechei. He said it should be your will that this man should desire light and he will not find it. So we'll say Eov was kind of cursing himself. He was saying, my mazel is so terrible that no matter how much I tried to find light in the midst of darkness, I cannot find it. Meses, the Gemara brings another raya, this time from Tehillim, va'omer ach choshech yeshufeni v'layla or ba'adeni. David HaMelech says, and I said that darkness will go ahead and envelop me, v'layla or ba'adeni. And literally again, Laila or night or is ba'adeni, is with me. Alma or yimamahu. So we'll say ultimately again, or I should read that a little bit differently. Va'omer ach choshech yishufeni v'Laila or ba'adani. So we'll say, so you see over here that there's a contrast, Laila and or. So David HaMelech, clearly you see Alma or yimamahu. Or ultimately means day. To which the Gemara says, we'll say, Hasam hachiyad kamar David. This is what David HaMelech was saying. Ani amarti, this is so beautiful. We'll say, David HaMelech said, I said to myself, ach choshech yeshifuni la'olam haba shudome liyom. So we'll say, David HaMelech said, I always assumed that darkness would always overtake me. So Rashi says, what is David HaMelech referring to? David HaMelech was referring to the aftermath of the episode with Bathsheba. I always thought that after what happened with Bathsheba, I would be beyond redemption. And therefore, again, I assumed that darkness would overtake me in Olam Haba. Choshech yishufani la'olam haba, shudom eliyom. So I'll say Olam Haba, which itself is normally like daytime, I assumed that, again, darkness would overtake me in the luminescence of Olam Haba. Achshov, however, ha'olam hazeh, shudom lelayla or ba'adani. But we'll say even in this world, which is like Laila, I find myself surrounded by light. So we'll say it's incredible pasuk. So David HaMelech thought, originally I thought my Olam Haba would be dark. But now I've come to find that even Olam Hazeh, which is normally dark, has become illuminated. So we'll say, what does that mean? Just as an aside, what is David HaMelech saying? Look at Rashi. David HaMelech says, Ani amarti, mipnei chata'i she'af mina olam haba etrad. So we'll say, I thought that I would lose Olam Haba because of Bathsheba, because of what happened with Bathsheba. Va'achshav shemachali al osa oven. But now that HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgave me for that episode with Bathsheba, af mina olam hazeh she'isi shariba b'choshech u'b'cherpa heir ba'adani. Even in this world in which I was enveloped in darkness, has now become illuminated. Because remember again, we saw the story in last cycle in Daf. And remember again, when they dedicated the Beis HaMikdash and they got to the gate of the Beis HaMikdash, the gates would not open. The only time they opened was when Shlomo HaMelech invoked the name of his father. Bavor David Avdi, when Shlomo mentioned David, then the gates opened. And everyone saw that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had forgiven David HaMelech's episode with Bathsheba. So again, I will say, once again, we begin to see R used in a number of different contexts, but still doesn't help us. Meisvei, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, so we'll say, listen to this. So the Gemara brings a raya over here. Fine, let's decide what R is. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bodkin la'arba'asar. Bodkin R la'arba'asar, u'ba'arba'asar shachris, u'b'shas habir. So we'll say this. Rabbi Yehuda says, we check for chametz R la'arba'asar, the morning of arba'asar, and at the time of Bir Chametz. Rabbi Yehuda Bodkin or Arba'asar Shachris. Supposed to be pretty explicit. Rabbi Yehuda says you could check or Arba'asar. There are different times for B'dikas Chametz. You could check at or Arba'asar and the morning of Arba'asar. So we'll say, what does that tell you? What does that tell you? The Gemara says clearly Alma or Artahu. We'll say that clearly tells you that R means evening. That R means evening. Because let's remember again, you could check or Arba'asar, Shachris Arba'asar, to which the Gemara says, Shema Mina. Oh, good Jose, since we have a raya. Amazingly enough, from all of the psukim mentioned, we couldn't really bring a raya. Because the psukim of Jose, which you begin to see, is that R was used much more as a modifier than as a noun. But here, again, Rabbi Yehuda says quite explicitly, you could check for chametz R arba'asar and shachris arba'asar. Meisvei, the Gemara says, 1 second. Me'emasai ba'arba'asar asar asiyas melacha. So listen to this. When on the changing gears for just a moment. When on the 14th are you asked to do malacha? So we'll say we'll discuss this. This is fascinating halacha about not doing malacha on Erev Pesach. One shouldn't do malacha on Erev Pesach. So we'll say from what point in the day in Erev Pesach and on should a person stop working? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Mishas ha'ar. Listen to this. So Eliezer ben Yaakov says, from the time of the ar. Rabbi Huda Omer Mishas Hanitzachama. Rabbi Huda says ultimately again from sunrise. So we'll say, so what's going on over here? And I will say, look at Rashi for just a moment. Mishas ha'ar, avakodim lachin afilu nagu batla daitin. Fine. So the Gemara is like this. Amar li Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Rabbi Huda. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says Rabbi Huda. V'chi heichan matzino yom shemiksaso aser b'asiyas melacha umiksaso mutar b'asiyas melacha. So we'll say, it seems to be over here that shas ha'ar, we'll define just a moment, means nightfall. From the time that it becomes night, from nightfall and on, one should not do malacha. So Rabbi Huda says, no, it's from sunrise. So Rabbi Yaakov says, Rabbi Huda, what are you talking about? From where do we ever see, Rabbi say, that you have a day where there's an Isser Malacha, and the Isser Malacha only starts from sunrise, as opposed to the night before? Amar lei, hu atzma yochiach. To which Rabbi Huda will say, the day itself will prove it. Shemiksasa mutar b'achilas chametz, or miksasa asar b'achilas chametz. So we'll say, look at Erev Pesach itself. Erev Pesach itself, part of the day you're allowed to eat chametz, part of the day you're not allowed to eat chametz. So we'll say, so the day itself is segmented, right? The day itself is divided. So you're right. Whereas normally you might say that either a day does have Isser Malacha or doesn't have Isser Malacha. The fact that Erev Pesach itself is already segmented. Part of the day you can eat chametz, part of the day you can't eat chametz. Therefore, I have no problem saying that at night you're allowed to do malacha, and the Isser Malacha begins as of Neitzach Hamo. So we'll say, Midikam Rabbi Huda Meishav Neitzach Hamo, Alma, or Tikam Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, Artu. So we'll say the fact that Rabbi Huda said that the time for Isser Malacha and Erev Pesach is Neitzach Hamo, sunrise, that must mean that the R that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said meant what? Means nightfall. Means nightfall. So we'll say another raya that R means nighttime. So the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. My R, maybe what does R mean? Amud HaShachar. Rabbi will say maybe R means dawn. Rabbi will say, remember again, there's between dawn and sunrise, right? Sunrise, machlokes, again, whether sunrise is, or whether dawn is 72 or 90 minutes before sunrise, right? But lamaisa, maybe Rabbi Elazar, the argument is like this. Maybe Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says the Isser Malacha on Erev Pesach begins as of dawn, and Rabbi Huda comes along and says, no, it doesn't begin until sunrise. Ihachi dika amar lehecher matzinu yom shemekzaso muter b'asiyas malacha o mekzaso aser b'asiyas malacha neima iyul nafshe ha'ika laila dekashari. We'll say if that's the case, then Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's question Rabbi Huda doesn't make any sense. Because remember, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said to Rabbi Huda, what do you mean the Isser Malacha doesn't start until Neitzach Hama? That means nighttime you could do Malacha, daytime you can't do Malacha. Where do we ever see such a distinction like that? Well, one second. If you're saying that R means dawn, then essentially Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is doing the same thing as Rabbi Huda. Both are agreeing that night you could do malacha. Okay, there's a machlokas. Does Isser Malacha begin at dawn or Neitzach Hama? But how could Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov ask such kasha Rabbi Huda? To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hachi kamar. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov means. We'll say first wide line, bottom of Beis Amud Beis. Hachi kamar. Bishlama lididi ashkechana dekapagi rabana ben yimama ben laila. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says like this. My distinction makes sense. Because remember, I will say this is going in the idea that Rabbi Eliezer's R doesn't mean night, but R means dawn. In which case, Rabbi Eliezer would be saying, you can do malacha at night, but once dawn comes, you can no longer do malacha. Rabbi Eliezer would say this, my distinction makes sense, because you find such a day-night distinction in other areas of halacha. Disnan, because we'll say, watch this, Disnan, kabe tainis sibur, we'll say we find by communal fast days, ad maseh ochel v'shoseh, we'll say, listen to this, if there's a communal fast day, when can you eat and drink until? Ultimately, again, until alos, until dawn. So we'll say you see that by, so again, Rabbi Shimon Omer at Kros Hagever, until the rooster crows. So we'll say, so again, you see already in halacha there exists the concept of a distinction between day and night, Laila and Yom. So fine, I could say therefore that what? That halacha l'maisa, the Isser Malacha on Erev Pesach applies at night, but doesn't apply at night, and once dawn comes, it applies. Ella, the Gemara says, Ella l'didach, heicha ashkechana yemama gufei depagi b'rabanan. But here's the problem. Where do you ever find the concept that something won't begin until Neitzach Hama? So you both say, remember, once Alos comes, it's day. It's day already. So therefore, where do you find in halacha concept that something should be permissible nighttime, through dawn, up until Neitzach Hama? and only come Neitzach Chama, that's when it becomes Aser. Where do we ever find it? Because we'll say what that's doing is that's saying something is permitted by night, part of day, and then when it becomes a different part of day, you can't do. Where do we ever find the concept like that? Amarle, hu atzma yochiach, to which Rabbi Yehuda will say that's not true. Look at Erev Pesach itself. Shemiksaso mutar b'achilas chametz umiksaso asur b'achilas chametz. So we'll say ultimately again, Erev Pesach itself is the raya, because Erev Pesach itself, part of the day itself is mutar b'achilas chametz, and part of it is asur b'achilas. The day itself is split. To which the Gemara says, Shapir kamar Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eliezer. So ultimately, Rabbi Yehuda is saying good. To which the Gemara says, Hachi kamar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer would respond back, Amin alacha ana malacha d'Rabbanan, that amrit li chametz d'oraisa. To which Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov will say, come on, I'm talking to you about malacha, which is a d'Rabbanan. So in d'Rabbanans, we don't splice the day like that. Don't bring me rayos from d'oraisas. So chametz on the d'oraisa, that's something different. To which the Gemara says, Da'at hacha asr rachmana v'at hacha rachmana. Doraisas are different. The Rebbe Shalom could split and splice the day however he wants. I'm talking about in Dinei D'Rabbanan. In Dinei D'Rabbanan, we find day-night splits, but what don't we find? What don't we find? We don't find day-day splits. Right? There's no such thing as being mechalik a day. To which the Gemara says, V'idach shals D'Rabbanan. So Rabbi Yehuda will respond, that's true, but remember, I will say even in the Isra Achilas Chametz, we'll get to this in the Sugya, right? Midaraisa, you can't eat Chametz from midday. But Lamaisa, we already see that beginning 2 hours even before that, we begin in Isra Achil and Isra Hana. So already again, the split of the day is still rabbinic. The Idach, Rabbi Yehuda will say still, Rabbi Yaakov will say, "V'idach harchaku da'avad rabbanan da'oraisa." No. We'll say at the end of the day, that harchaka, right? Those additional hours that the rabbis add on, that's there to strengthen a da'oraisa. That's not, even though again the hours may be midirabbanan, but they are there to strengthen the da'oraisa. I will say meisvei. So the Gemara raises one more point. We'll start this. We're going to try to finish this sugya, although we're not going to make it in time. So begin. I will say meisvei. Listen to this. This is really quite fascinating. So we know that in halacha, every month could have 29 days or 30 days. Right? That's the maximum. Therefore, again, I will say depending. So if a month has 29 days, then the 30th day is Rosh Chodesh. A month has 30 days. Then the 31st day is Rosh Chodesh. Obviously, the way they used to communicate the Rosh Chodesh to the surrounding communities, ultimately it was through lighting of a series of bonfires. Nobody will say, we're going to stop over here for today. I know I'm leaving you on a cliffhanger because we're so close. The 2 dots is right there. 2 dots is right there. But we'll see. You'll wait for the... So again, I will say, remember, bottom line is we still don't know what the definition of R is, although we're getting pretty close. Because although, interestingly enough, we did not prove it from all of the psukim mentioned, we seem to have 2 brises that pretty clearly indicate that the definition of R, at least in this context, means nightfall. And Meretz Hashem, complete resolution tomorrow. Bosai.